Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Keira Poulson, and she is mother to 5 amazing children. She's also an intuitive, energetic healer and creator. And Keira has created the Awaken program and the Awaken Mastermind, programs designed to help leaders learn how to do their own daily healing work and awaken their ability to be leaders of light. She's also the host of the Awaken Podcast. There's definitely a theme there about Awaken. So anyway, it's really my pleasure to have you on this podcast and to share, some of your journey and your gifts with everyone. And so welcome, Keira.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm going to start with one comment that you made, which is, let me quote you properly so that I have, the most impact for you is when you realize that everyone has the gift of healing within. So I would like you to tie in your healing journey with that realization.
So my healing journey, it's been a long journey. I grew up with 2 parents who are healers. So it was my knowingness, my world. I had this deep hunger to learn healing. And so I would say at 16, I began just diving into the world of healing with my parents, but not my own, like deep, dark healing, just learning the practice of healing. And I spent many years doing healing work, which was lovely and kind. It was like this peaceful experience. But then I feel as though all of those years of healing had prepared me to finally do the deep dive. And it was an answer to my prayer as I had been seeking. I had had 5 children and I was feeling very lost. I didn't really know who I was anymore. I couldn't remember dreaming. I didn't know how to dream. I felt like I'd reached the end of my goals and I was 31, 32. And it was like, what do I do now with my life? And so I prayed and prayed for months that God would show me my purpose. Give me my purpose. Even though motherhood was my purpose, I knew that there was like a purpose for Keira. And after months and months and months of praying, I received my answer. But the answer came in the form of my own childhood trauma pain showing up. I had been a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and that pain just showed up out of like nowhere. There had been triggers that had pulled it out. And that was the beginning of me finally doing my deep healing work. It was the beginning of me spending weeks and weeks and weeks in rapid eye therapy, choosing to finally feel the pain and stop running from it, finally choosing to acknowledge what had happened and then doing the deep cleansing healing. And so even though I had been studying healing for years prior, that was when I began to do my deep healing. And it only expanded my practice experience as a healer because I had walked through that fire.
And so when you I love the way you describe the difference between the practices of care, so-called healing, because I think, any, it's kind of, I don't know, better way to say, but any true practitioner of healing knows that they are not the healer, but they're the facilitator of it, right?
Yeah.
But there's, patients who will say, well, I went to see so-and-so, but I didn't feel it. I felt as if the things were the same, but it wasn't the same, right? And so my personal belief is that that something happens when you go through a journey that changes your relationship to yourself for one, but also to those around you, right? So for you, uh, when you were, so both your parents were practitioners of sorts or healers of, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, first of all, what attracted you to that part of it? How did that start? And then let's go deeper, of course.
Well, it was when I was 16. I remember I was dating, it was a very toxic relationship. He was a druggie and verbally abusive. It was like not an okay situation that I was in. And I mean, I'd lost like 20 pounds and and then I got this cough. And I was a dancer. I was a very, very intense dancer. I spent probably 4 hours, 5 hours a day dancing. Ballet and modern, and this cough just wasn't serving me. I mean, I remember dancing and dancing and just coughing and coughing, and I had it for about 5 months. And finally my dad, up until that point, he had actually never done any work with me, and he said, let's do some work. Let's do some work. And he does a form of muscle testing, energy work, and one session and my cough was gone. And in that moment, it planted the seed of what was possible, of like, oh, there's a whole other world here. Here I'd been going to doctors and I'd been doing all these things and nothing was working. And then one session of doing this energy work and my cough of like 5-6 months was gone. And then, you know, I didn't see this as a 16-year-old, but now I can look back. And then shortly afterwards, I ended that relationship with that boyfriend. And so it was like, oh, there is power here. And it was, I mean, to me, this is who I am. My soul, my knowingness like came alive at that moment. Like, this is who I am here to be, is this someone who partakes in this work, because it's something I was so passionate about, even from that young age. Ever since then, it was this, I remember thinking in my mind, one day I'm going to do this work. And here I am.
Interesting. I mean, it's fascinating how it's that knowingness that you talk about, but that comes from also the ability to observe, right? Because you know, so many people say, oh well, oh, that's a coincidence. It has nothing to do with, you know, and often when patients, you know, ask you about the results and what can you actually say, well, there's some things you can say, this is somewhat predictable, but what is not as clear is their ability to live into the moment and notice and trust that the change that's happening within them and what it's calling them, you know, to do, right? So I mean, that was a clear, you saw it, you basically, and you acted upon it. Yeah. So okay, let's go now to a little bit deeper here, because I mean, to find out that, you know, you were abused, was this an unconscious memory then that you?
No, I'd always been conscious of it. And it was something I was always like, oh, it didn't affect me. I'm really strong. This wasn't a big part of my life. I know it happened, but look who I am. I'm strong and I made it through this. And I just so deeply believe that we aren't given the pain until we're able to deal with it. And that pain was held back until a time that I had the tools and the capacity to move through the pain. And it didn't happen until, you know, at that point in my life, in my 30s, where finally I had the ability to face the pain that up until that point had just been held. I didn't have to feel it until then. And so it was like memories of pain, but the knowingness that it always happened was there. The memories of the pain showed up.
So that's a deeper part of you that I guess your brain made it make sense that, oh well, it happens. You probably I totally relate to what you're saying, but it's like, because I was in a similar situation in a relationship which I co-created. I mean, I never think it's one way, but what you allow yourself to experience is also your choice. I mean, they're not maybe as an infant or a small child, it's like that gets a little more complicated. But you know, as an adult, you know, certainly we do, I believe strongly we do have choices if we can understand how we're part of this journey and the part that we take. And when you mention this whole idea of like, I'm strong enough, it's like a justification of, well, yeah, that happened to me, but it happens to, you know, 4 out of 5 women, or it happens to 3 out of 5, or whatever as the statistics change, and that, and men too who go through this. But it's easy to make it like, I mean, it's an interesting thing, because you can make it mean a million things that can end you in victimhood.
Yeah.
And you can identify with that, but you can also choose to really allow the flushing out of the trapped memory. And what I'm hearing you say is that it was the trapped emotions that somehow you had separated yourself from, like a type of disassociation from the pain. Because being strong is a coping mechanism too.
Totally. And I love the word flushing, because that's how it feels. For me, it was like that the deep therapy that I did to clean it out was a flushing, and it was a rebirth. And I believe that that's just what happens for us, right? At that time, it felt like my ground was broken, that anything that I had known to be true felt false. It was like my whole world came apart. But in that, a rebirth happened, and I changed. Like, even my physical being, if you were to see pictures before and after, I look different. I am different because I chose to let the pain be a catalyst for my rebirth. And from that space, so many miracles have happened. I wrote a book in like 6 months' time. I created a publishing house. Now I own a publishing house, and I help other people publish, and I help leaders awaken to their light. None of this would have happened if I hadn't chosen to have this experience be a rebirth. There's a choice in the pain.
Yeah, interesting. So are you able to, or willing, you know, because it may, you know, this is a public discussion, but can you explain, are you able to explain it in more detail, what it meant to connect to the emotions and not, and allow them? Because I think that's a complicated concept, personally. And I think it can easily be, lead you down a path of constantly reliving, which is, you know, part of what happens with PTSD and all kinds of other trauma reactions. But what's the difference between what your steps to in this healing process and this sort of wheels turning that keep people stuck?
Okay, let me see if I can put it into adequate words. So for me, the day that my pain hit, I didn't want to live anymore because it was so painful, and I didn't know how to experience that kind of pain. And I made a commitment to God. I said, if you can show me why I need to stay on this earth, like why I don't end my life, if you can show me why I'm here, I commit to doing everything you inspire me to do to live a purposeful life. And that commitment rooted me into new soil. It changed my life. And so that meant the days and days of me crying and laying in bed and not being able to move and letting the pain move through my body, there was a purpose. And one of my favorite authors, and he's actually one of my really good friends, his name is Benjamin Hardy. He says, let the memories of your trauma not happen to you, but for you. And that is the shift in perspective. The shift in perspective is, yes, there is pain. Yes, you will move through it if you can imagine that this trauma happened for you. And 1,000,000% I can stand on this side of that pain and say, my sexual abuse trauma and the pain that I felt later in my 30s has happened for me, because it is who I am now. It is because of everything that I now have created derived from the experience of breaking and choosing to make things new. So the experience wasn't for naught. I didn't have the pain for naught. There was a deep purpose for it. And that's what pulled me through and it didn't get me stuck in the quicksand that pain can really become.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, I relate to that. It's in a sense, it's I forget whose quote this is. It's a philosopher, but man's desire, and I guess women are included in that, but to make meaning of their life, right? But it's not for nothing, and I think that's it's really a powerful way to look at it. Now, for people who may be atheists or have had religious trauma, because there's a lot of patients I know who have gone through, whether it's cults or whether it's shaming and guilting, practices in better known religions. So that's their worldview of God, and that's and that God, as they're transitioning, isn't necessarily the safe God or the good God, right? Because part of the stories I've heard as well, if God was there, they wouldn't have allowed me to suffer so much. They would have protected me as a child. So now I don't know your background, whether it was religious and safely religious, so to speak. But do you have any insight for people who don't have that safety with their practices and beliefs?
So I actually launched a podcast called Navigating Truth. It only has 4 episodes. It's we're going to call it a series. It's not a full-blown podcast, but I felt very guided to create that because I grew up very, very, very religious. And when my world broke, my religion broke for me. So painful, probably equally as painful, because my religion was my God. So when the religion broke for me, it was like, oh no, I have nothing left. This was the thing that kept me safe. This was the thing that held me. And it took me on a 7-year journey of really being alone, because I grew up in a religion that is, my whole family is this religion, and it's a whole community and lifestyle. And the gift in my religious breaking, like my religious beliefs, and feeling as though all that I once knew no longer was true, was that I got to find out who God was for me. Not the God that I was taught, not the God that I grew up believing in, like who God is for me. And that God showed up in my quiet spaces. That God showed up in my hell, in the moments of hell. That's when that God would begin to speak to me and show me the purposes, the reasons why pain had happened, why hell had happened. And that even in the midst of the pain, the God that I was starting to know held me in love. And so for me, I feel so strongly that whether you want to call it a God or the universe or your divine self, there is a higher presence and being that is filled with the most immense love and can guide you. And that's where we need to tap into, whether it is a God or the universe or whatever you want to call it, but there is a higher presence that we can tap into that will lead us, that will hold us. And we have to break all the ties to what we once thought was true so that we can find the truth within ourselves. And that was my experience. And it was really painful.
Yeah.
and abundant joy after.
Yeah. And but in it, it's painful, and something allowed you to trust the process, right? So it's almost like, you know, those images where people jump, and you know, at least I know in in business, because I've taken so many courses in this as well, you know, they say, well, you just have to jump, and the, you know, the bridge will appear, or the net will appear, and it's a hard one to do unless you trust. But who do you trust, right? That's the thing. If you just trust the person that tells you to jump, you might actually fall and injure yourself. You have to have that. The cycle has to happen first within, right? That's that catching that moment where, you know, and I think for you, you say that you're committed, and committed is not a small word. You know, committed is really, it's almost like seeing that there will be a bridge.
Yeah.
Like some part in you connected to that, so that you could let go, right? Like I've been looking at the chicken and egg thing, you know, in the training that I do. I have a program called Listen, you know, and it's all about listening to your body, and also knowing the difference between fear-based actions or beliefs and true knowing, intuitive spaces, right? And because that was part of my journey as well, you know, so it's interesting to see. But I love the idea that the commitment really is it's the string that holds the next, or the surrender, the ability to surrender in trust.
Yeah.
Hi, this is a small commercial break, and for you to let me know that you're enjoying these conversations, please go, 1, to subscribe to my podcast. Number 2, write a review, because if you write a review on iTunes, more people know about this, and I can help spread the work, my work, but the work of everyone else I'm interviewing. And number 3, please sign up to my tips for your healing journey. And you can do that under www.drmanonboliger.com/tips. Thank you.
Yeah, the commitment pulled me forward to being the leader that I choose to be now. The commitment to, like, there is a deeper purpose of why I'm here on this earth, and I'm committed to living that purpose out. Otherwise, it made it feel like the pain just wasn't worth it. There had to be a bigger reason for all that pain. And I just feel so deeply that we are so guided. If we open up to receive, we will be shown the next step and the next step every single time. And that's the place of ease. And that's the abundance of grace that comes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. So, well, then you've created all these incredible programs, like on this, you know, difficult, but definitely worthwhile transition. Yeah, you've awakened everything. So tell us a little bit about that journey, and how your own path led you to the imminent and absolutely necessary next step.
Yeah, I spent a long time just being a healing facilitator, and it was beautiful and lovely and wonderful, but there was like a piece missing. And the piece missing for me was that people would come and we do this extraordinary healing session, and then they leave, and then they go back to their life, and they wouldn't change any of their daily life. And so when they came in, it was like these fantastic sessions, but I wanted more for them. I wanted them to be able to do different actions in their days, which would ultimately truly change their lives. So that's when I felt inspired to create the Awaken program, which is a 12-week digital course on how you do your own daily healing. And I created it for my clients. So it's like they could come in and do a deep dive, but then every day they were doing their healing work, which ultimately was awakening their inner voice and awakening their divine self and their inner healer. Because I believe everyone is a healer. Just we haven't been taught the language of healing. And so my goal is to teach people that language so that they can find that they have the power within them to heal.
Mm-hmm. And so I know it's hard to sum up an entire, step-by-step program or system, but because it's based on your own experience, obviously, what can you sort of explain it in general, what the steps are in a sense, like an overview?
So each class, I take one chakra at a time, and I teach you what emotions are stuck in there, what physical things get out of alignment when that space is messy, or I see it in my visualize as broken, like broken pieces. And so I tell you, okay, if you're dealing with financial troubles and your feet are hurting, it's your root chakra. Let's go in and let's do some work in there. And so the practice is very simple. It's a lot of meditation with breathing, with speaking out, like releasing the things that aren't working for you, and then using your words to speak and declare what is now so. And there's something so powerful about using our words connected with visualization and breathing that allows for a very quick and deep change to occur. And I created these daily practices to be 10 minutes. It's just 10 minutes. Everyone's got 10 minutes. And I have people talk so much about the shifts that happen just from this very simple practice.
Oh, fascinating, huh? So, and what it was the chakra system something that was what you were practicing before you got into the deeper work? No. You came to, so what was the transition from what type of practices to what you then resonated with for yourself?
So I learned, my dad has a school called the Muscle Testing Academy. So I went through that years before I went through my deep healing. And that's the healing work that I was doing. I was doing this muscle testing energy work, and it was awesome. And I loved it. But there was no way I could take that and teach people how to do their own work. So there was always this missing link. Well, then my mother became certified in energy mastery as a master practitioner, and she started a school. So I went and took her class, and her class was more into the chakras. And so I was like, okay, this is a new conversation for me. So I began doing my own daily healing work in my chakras with the energy mastery. And I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but when I got in there and I would work in my chakras or in anyone else's, I would hear what was stuck in their chakras. They would speak to me. And so it was this whole new world. And even though anyone in the world who's studied chakras knows all this stuff, I hadn't studied them. The chakras taught them to me. And that's what I created the Awaken practice from, was what people's chakras would tell me was stuck in there and what needed to be done to release it. And so as woo-woo as that sounds, that was my path of starting this beautiful relationship with that part of the energetic body and why I'm so passionate about it.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, and it's a different, I think too, because I train healthcare practitioners, right? In it's called Bowen College. And we use the body, and so it's a physical therapy called Bowen theme. But it's not just a physical therapy. We use the body to enter and release a whole bunch of things, But one of my passions in the training is releasing the true innate healer within the practitioner themselves, right? And it's this they say the master will show up when the student is ready, but it's also that you will learn from the learning. What speaks to you will speak to you, literally, and I learned that also firsthand, because and I actually thought everyone had this gift, that I can hear the stuckness in the bodies. So it's like, oh, it's there's a tightness, a stuckness. And later I learned, oh, that's the fascia that's stuck, because all the the science came later, to understand all the pieces. Or indeed, that is a meridian line. Oh, okay, so I was conceptually able to, and I am a naturopathic doctor, so I have that background, but that's not how I learned it. It literally also like came to me. And I think that, like you, if I can do it, so can you. So it's like we really all have our way of interpreting and of receiving the gift, if we connect to it and allow it. It's like the microcosm and the macrocosm of healing. It's all completely connected.
Oh, I love that. I think, there's something so beautiful. There's one of my favorite books is called The Big Leap, and he talks about your creative genius, and that your creative genius is the thing that feels like, oh, everybody knows this. It feels so easy, like, oh, everybody knows this. And that's when you're like, no, that's your zone. That's what you are supposed to teach everyone else. And so it's so lovely that you say that, because like, that's your zone. That's what you're here to do, is to bring forward what you feel is so simple inside, because that's what everyone else needs to know. So I love that. That's gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, it's very much the same as you. So it's actually really wonderful to own it, reverence, which is very much the way you speak. So very interesting. Well, let's see, at this point, I'm just trying to think what else well, what I would like to talk about, and we don't have to go deeply into that, but everyone's talking about stress, and we're in a situation right now where there's a lot of stress. I mean, there's more depression, more anxiety, more suicides, and there are people that are dying alone, and there's stress about a virus. There's also stress about losing our rights, individual rights, and I'm not talking about the mask or not the mask. I'm just saying in general about the level of of control or access to information. So if you're going to be stressed, there is a reason you can choose. And I wanted to have your version of what stress is, and how do you handle stress?
So to me, the way, this is interesting, because this is the writing that came forward for me today. I was creating my podcast for the Awaken Podcast, and I had zero, like normally they come to me, like my podcasts show up and I know what they are going to be. And today I was like, oh dear, I don't know what this is going to be. God, you better show me something. And then this writing came in, and this is what it was about. And what it is that right now, all of our old pains, all of our old fears that we have really dug deep underneath this layer of dirt of busyness and numbing and being overstimulated, it's almost as if the earth has quaked and all of our old stuff is starting to resurface. And we weren't prepared, and no one said yes for it. And that creates so much stress when you weren't prepared for it, which is usually how it happens. And so the way I see this is that new actions are being called forward. Our old ways no longer work. None of them are working. And so we've got to find new ways to deal with what's happening in the world, to deal with the level of stress that we are experiencing. And so if you're going back to old behaviors of like, oh, well, I used to drink alcohol, that used to help, or I used to, go out to the bars, but now they're closed, or whatever the old patterns that once had numbed, no longer work. So now it's like, what's the new way? And the way I see it is this is an opportunity to carve out time every day to be still, to breathe deep, and to connect within and to the higher presence in your life. If we can do that, not only will the stress start to dissipate, but this can be the rebirth that you and I talked about at the beginning. This can be the rebirth of every single person in the world, which would make a full collective awakening and rebirth. So the stress could be one of our biggest gifts if we choose to allow it.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. And while you were talking, I was thinking the thought that came, we talked at the beginning that it comes like an awakening or a confrontation with a suppressed part of us that we didn't really know or didn't allow, comes when we're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, a lot of people don't appear ready for this, right? So, pardon me. So I've been wondering that concept because I agree with you that it is a massive opportunity to look in and to change our behaviors and look more deeply at our connection with nature, at our connection with each other, actually, especially with the social distancing and all of these practices where I think in some ways it has the real potential of making us realize how important people are to each other and how important touch is and how, so there's a lot of things that by the lack of that we awaken to the gift of, I see that juxtaposition. But what to all the people who feel that this is, they're not ready for it.
Yeah. To them, I would say you are. You have everything you need inside. And to those who feel called to be leaders but have been quiet and haven't shared their messages, I would say now is the time, because it is from those who are willing to share their messages, to share their ways of coping and healing and these conversations that we're having right here, right now. This is what's going to give the other people tools who don't have them yet. It's like a ship needs to be built and some people have hammers and other people have no tools. If we have hammers, let's go and give them the hammers. Let's like really start to share the tools that we've used to help us in our times of breaking so that everyone is now equipped. And for every person to know that if they were to take time every day, go inward and spend some time connecting to a higher source, whatever that is for them, that they will actually be given tools that they didn't know existed that will help them move through this space.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really believe that life is perfect and it's happening for you. And as grim as it can look and as scary as it is, and as really painful as it is for many people who are not as privileged, to even be on a podcast or, having this kind of conversation, but are like in survival mode, looking for food, for, or how to escape out of their own households. And, so my heart goes out to all those people.
Yeah.
And I do feel that by holding the space for the possibility and not fighting it, which doesn't mean not having an opinion, not, I really believe in the freedom to speak and the freedom she is. And I mean, we've been confronted with so many opposing points of view, numbers that make no sense, numbers that are calculated strangely, numbers that are not shared, studies that are missing from the internet. I mean, it's been so confusing that
Yeah.
I believe the trust in people has been shattered in many people. And yet, when one trust is shattered, it's back to trusting yourself and trusting and doing the steps that it takes to really connect to that deep trust within us, so that it's a huge opportunity.
I agree. I agree. And it's so intriguing because that's what my whole path of pain was, losing the trust in my religion, losing the trust in humans, because all of my pain showed back up. And it was the losing the trust in all the outside world that allowed me to gain the trust inside, which is what created the massive change. And that's the opportunity here.
Yeah. Well, Keira, that's perfect. I think I'm going to leave it at those words, because I think that's really the message that this podcast is really about. Yeah. And when people listen to this, they'll have access to your gift as well. We'll put the URL, since you created it all this week, which is perfect. Everything is in perfect timing always. And so
it is.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience.
Thank you for having me on. I so deeply appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbollinger.com.